still does not have the votes necessary to clinch the speakership, and we're expecting them to adjourn and then come back later tonight for more votes. They also have a couple of members who are absent right now, need to give them time to come back into town, one facing a medical emergency, for an example. So that just goes to show how everything here is really a puzzle piece trying to get to this final conclusion. But McCarthy just now with us telling us that he is feeling good and confident. And I asked him why, and he said, well, I can count. So, that has been in question heading into this whole process, of course. It's taken more than a dozen ballots to get here, but he has been feeling comfortable, and you see him now coming again behind me, heading back onto the floor. So chaotic whirlwind of a day here, but we are, having more to report than before.
So let's turn to Scott MacFarlane, perhaps, Caitlin, while you try to chase down Leader McCarthy. Scott, it's interesting to hear that McCarthy's saying he's feeling confident. If he does, in fact, succeed eventually here, what will realistically his power as Speaker be, given how we have seen these previous votes go and the acrimony that has been involved with this whole process?
Well, one of the concessions he seems to have made is to make it easier to remove him if a faction of his conference is displeased in the future. What they call a motion to vacate. That is something he has, through these concessions and negotiations with this group, made easier to obtain in the future. So let's start with that as a foundation. Otherwise, this breakaway group of Republicans who were not in his camp on the speaker vote may be also breaking away on other pivotal issues. The debt ceiling, government spending bills, or anything else that comes through this Capitol in which maybe a bipartisan group is needed. This may be a faction that causes him trouble down the road. There are some members of the House or some of their staffers who told me today, maybe it's better we had this family meeting on a speakership vote, where there's not a whole lot of real-world immediate consequences. If they had this level of internal fighting, this internal political civil war, when the debt ceiling needs to be raised, that could have a calamitous impact on America. So maybe this bridges a divide, or maybe this just temporarily bridges a divide.
And so then, Scott, considering those concessions, which have been reported, which many of the members have been sharing with you and other correspondents there, is it fair for viewers to then think that this new Congress, or at least the leadership among the Republicans, will be more conservative over these next 2 years than was expected before all of this?
Well, these Freedom Caucus members, the more conservative part of the Republican conference, have seemed to have navigated their way onto more powerful panels inside the U.S. House. According to the discussions about the agreements that we've been hearing, it's possible this group has navigated their way towards seats on the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee sounds real bureaucratic, doesn't it? That's the committee that controls the House floor and that has its fingerprints on every piece of legislation that goes through the U.S. House. To call it pivotal is an understatement. But also, they seem to be negotiating over issues involving the budget and government spending. To a degree, they may be pre-negotiating the legislation coming down the pike and trying to cap or curb spending. That's going to impact the U.S. military. That's going to impact domestic spending. But to a degree, and this really is the bottom line, all of this is messaging, because what the Republican House does, be it conservative, moderate, or otherwise, still has to go through the Democratic Senate, still has to go through President Biden's desk. So a lot of what they do is dead on arrival anyhow, but this group has managed to impact what comes out of the House moving forward.
All right, just to reset for our viewers, we are continuing to keep a close eye, of course, on the floor of the House, where we are expecting a vote to adjourn until 10 p.m. Eastern time. And Scott, as we await that vote, as it goes on, explain what Kevin McCarthy might still have left to negotiate with as he tries to get those remaining holdouts on his side. Is there anything left to concede?
It's an excellent question, because that's the question that's going to define the next 6 hours. And I say 6 hours because the board you just showed indicates they have the votes to adjourn until 10 p.m. Washington, D.C. time tonight. So that leaves a little time for that. Oh, and now they've got the 219 votes. This thing is passed. They will adjourn until 10 p.m. Washington, D.C. time. The people with whom they're negotiating now, though, they're the hard sells. These are members, including Matt Gaetz of Florida and Bob Good of Virginia, who have been unequivocal and vitriolic in their criticisms of Kevin McCarthy, using phrases like, "I will never, ever vote for Kevin McCarthy." Congressman Gaetz told me earlier this week, "Not tonight, not this week, not this month will I ever vote for Kevin McCarthy." Those aren't the types of things you say and then have the capacity to change your mind about. There are others who may be deemed more gettable, but here we are. After the 12th vote, Kevin McCarthy got this wave of the faction to flip. But on the 13th vote, the 6 remaining still didn't do so. That intransigence is indicating that there may be some very difficult negotiations to close the deal. He'll need 2 more to flip, or he'll need 3 of these 6 to vote present, which means they aren't voting for Kevin McCarthy, but they're not voting for anybody else, which changes the math in McCarthy's favor. And all of this, as Caitlin said, requires those 2 absent Republicans who are away for family emergencies or health emergencies to come back to Washington later tonight. Obviously, they're expecting that because they're having an adjournment till 10 p.m., giving them the time to come back.
So just to summarize where we sit at 3:36 p.m. on Friday, after 13 rounds of voting, Kevin McCarthy has failed to attract enough votes to be the next House Speaker. But today, Elaine, we've watched the trajectory move in his direction. Mm-hmm. Now the House has voted to adjourn for the short while while they go backstage again and negotiate what else can be conceded. We just saw Kevin McCarthy exiting the chamber. I believe our Caitlin Huey-Burns is in that scrum of reporters trying to talk to him as well.
That's right.
But this is where we stand. Potentially, we could have a new House Speaker tonight.
Yes, and our Robert Costa just tweeted a few minutes ago that he walked with McCarthy in that group of reporters just now to the floor. He said, he told me when this is over, quote, "You'll be calling me the comeback kid." Bob reports that he predicted victory and then added he will, quote, outwork anyone, and that this has shown he never quits. Pointedly said others would have quit, and he does not quit. Scott McFarland, give us a bit of context here. When it comes to Kevin McCarthy, we're talking about him quite a bit. What was his reputation in the House of Representatives, this longtime congressman who not that long ago was seen as part of a young group of upstart conservatives who were going to themselves change the way that business was conducted in the House?
Yeah, Elaine, he swept in the leadership after the 2010 midterm elections during the first term of President Obama's administration, when Republicans had an overwhelming victory and Republicans took control.
All right, stand by, please, Scott. We're going to go to Kevin McCarthy. This is moments ago. Let's listen in.
It just reminds me of what my father always told me. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. And now we have to finish for the American public.
What was the turnaround? What was the breaking point in these negotiations?
I think getting together and just finding the ability to how are we all going to work together. It's new for us, one, being in the majority, but being in a tight majority. I think at the end of the day, we're going to be more effective, more efficient, and definitely government's going to be more accountable.
How worried are you that you just...
How do you expect to govern this way if it has been taking this long to get the Congress united?
See, this is the great part. Because it took this long, now we learned how to govern. So now we'll be able to get the job done. Thank you all very much. See you later.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, I knew I saw you in that crowd throwing the questions at Kevin McCarthy. Catch us up on what you were trying to get to, what he said, and how we should interpret what Kevin McCarthy said.
Yeah, Errol, and good to be with you again. Sorry, I'm literally, untethering myself from here and chasing them as they go. So thanks for bearing with us, but that kind of gives you a sense of the chaos of today. I asked Kevin McCarthy just there, you just heard him answer, even if you get the number of votes you need to be speaker, what does it mean for governing that it has taken this long, that it has taken these many rounds of negotiations to get to a point that they nominate a leader? And he said, look, essentially, we are glad that we're having this hammered out now, that it'll make us stronger going in, that we've kind of had this family discussion. I mean, you can argue, however, that they've had more than just a family discussion. I mean, they've had kind of this real public infighting and a lot of bruising here, if you think about it. I mean, you've had Republican rank and file members really, calling these other members, essentially saying that they've been taking the party hostage in these negotiations. So a lot of, a lot has built up here, and I'm just keeping an eye. Whenever I see reporters running, I know there's someone behind them, so pardon me for that. But it just points to the overall point, which is that even if they get through tonight, and get the amount of votes that they need for McCarthy to become Speaker, he's going to have to kind of go through a lot of this every time they move through legislation. And so it's kind of, reaching the goal, but hurdles still remain.
And Scott McFarland, if you're with us, I'm sorry I had to interrupt earlier for that tape playback. You were telling us about Kevin McCarthy's record in the House. This is a position, Speaker of the House, that he has wanted for a very long time.
Yeah, he rose to prominence in leadership after the 2010 elections, in which Republicans had a big day and won a big majority. He joined a few other names we know from the recent political past. Paul Ryan, the most recent Republican Speaker of the House, John Boehner, who was the leader of that new Republican Congress and House of Representatives, and Eric Cantor from Virginia, who was also among the recent Republican House leaders. Those other three are gone, wiped away. Eric Cantor by the same political faction to a degree that was making life difficult for Kevin McCarthy. So McCarthy survived. Scott,
we've got one more interruption to make, only because Caitlin Huey-Burns was able to grab Steve Scalise. Take it away, Caitlin.
Okay. Hey, sorry. Thank you so much, Congressman Scalise. Good to see you. We are getting close here. Do you expect McCarthy to become the Speaker tonight?
There's a real chance. Obviously, talks continue to go on, but you can see over the last 2 days, a lot of progress has been made. And it's really focused on making sure that we can change the way that the House of Representatives has worked. It really hasn't addressed the needs of hardworking families for a long time. We want to make sure that we've got the rules in place so that members can go tackle things like inflation, energy, border crisis, spending, which is out of control. So those are the things that we've been working through. Obviously, a lot of good agreements have been made that have gotten us really close. We're going to keep working to get there.
What would you say was the turning point today?
Well, last night, there were a few final pieces that were put in place, but all of it's been focused on changing the way that Washington works, but especially the way that Congress works, because the system has been so dysfunctional for years, not just proxy voting, but members not even being able to offer amendments on the floor to address real problems that families across the country are facing. So, we've got a lot of talented members. They came to Washington to solve big problems, and yet Congress really wasn't set up to help them do that over the last few years. We're making big changes to turn that around.
How can you govern, though, if it has taken this long to get the number of votes? And again, we're not there yet. How can you govern effectively if it has taken this whole process to be able to just pick a leader of the party?
The negotiations have really been on how we do business for the next 2 years. So once you get that agreed upon, and that is what the rules package is going to be, it's the rules that we operate under for the next 2 years. And that's what all of the negotiations have been on. So once we have that agreement, then we can actually start moving the agenda. We've got a robust agenda, again, to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, lowering the costs not only for energy, but for other things that people are buying at the grocery store. Just dealing with spending in Washington. Those are all things that we wanted to make sure that the rules allow members to address these problems. And in the past, look, so much had been done top down, bills written, 1,000-page bills written in the Speaker's office the night before a vote. Nobody knows what's in it. All of that has to change. And I think that's what disgusts people about Washington, is that they see that so much of this happens behind closed doors. Let's bring things out more in public view. Let's start addressing problems that families are facing. And this rules package that we've been finalizing will allow members to do that.
And then can you just assess your level of confidence that by tonight, Kevin McCarthy will be Speaker?
Look, we continue to make great
100%?
progress. Look, it's going to be, it's higher than it was yesterday, and that's all you want to do. You always want to be making progress, and clearly we made a lot of progress today. We're going to keep working through till we vote again at 10 o'clock tonight.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. So you heard him there, and the reason that I grabbed him so quickly is because he will be, if all goes, the majority leader of this conference. And as you know, when there was talk about alternatives to McCarthy, there's always been this question of would Scalise be the next name if McCarthy was not able to get the votes. But you heard him there; he's sounding pretty confident, but not enough to put a firm number on it.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns on Capitol Hill and Scott McFarland, our profound thanks to you both.
Yeah.
Your forbearance with the interruptions, but we so appreciate bringing those lawmakers and their perspectives to our viewers in real time. This is what happens in a moment like this. You try to get those kinds of insights that help us understand the process. Thanks to you both.
And really, all of us. We've just been witnessing history all week.
Right.
And it's been such a long time since it's gone this many rounds to find a House Speaker. We will be back with more on this, and you'll see our correspondents there on Capitol Hill at the top of the hour as we continue to bring you the biggest stories of the day. Stay with CBS News. A fresh update for you from Washington now. The House of Representatives is adjourned until 10 p.m. After another dramatic day of voting for who will be the next Speaker of the House.
Kevin McCarthy gained significant momentum over the last 2 rounds of voting. The California congressman won the support of 15 of the roughly 20 Republicans who had been blocking his nomination for the speakership. Let's bring back CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns and CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland now for more. All right, Caitlin, Scott, it has been a day, as they say. Welcome back.
It's been a day.
Scott, let me start with you. So what does the fact that the House adjourned until 10 p.m. tonight actually signify for Kevin McCarthy and his chances of becoming House Speaker?
An awful lot. It's not a random or coincidental time. Republicans are trying to get 2 absent members back into town, one of whom had a medical appointment or procedure, another who had a death in the family, and both were absent from the earlier votes. Doing this at 10 p.m. Washington, D.C. time, which, by the way, will typically become 11 p.m. by Congress's time, gives them an opportunity to get back. Congress has a tendency to run late when not constitutionally obligated to hold votes at certain times. That being said, that they're going to press ahead the Republican majority with a vote tonight is an indication they believe they have a pathway towards victory sooner than later, and they want to put the pedal to the metal and press down now to make this happen. There are still 6 members of the House Republican Conference who are not voting for Kevin McCarthy. Assuming those 2 come back to town who are out of town, McCarthy will need to flip 2 of the remaining 6. And here's the trick. These are the 6 most intransigent members of the conference. It's like having a shopping list at the grocery store. He knocked out the first 16 items he could find, but the other 6, he may have to go to different stores and hunt them down because they're hard to get. So Kevin McCarthy and his negotiators, his allies in his conference, will have to do some talking with those other 6 members. But a couple of them, especially Matt Gaetz of Florida and Bob Good of Virginia, have been unequivocal in saying they will not vote for Kevin McCarthy. This is a more difficult pool to fish in.
And yet, Kevin McCarthy did seem optimistic when he spoke earlier about his chances when everyone gets back to vote tonight. Caitlin, you spoke with him and threw some questions at him as he spoke with reporters. Let's quickly listen to what he had to say to you, and we'll get your breakdown of that immediately after.
I think you saw we made some very good progress. We'll come back tonight, and I believe at that time we'll have the votes to finish this once and for all. It just reminds me of what my father always told me. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. And now we have to finish for the American public.
What was the turnaround? What was the breaking point in these negotiations?
I think getting together and just finding the ability to how we all going to work together. It's new for us, one, being in the majority, but being in a tight majority. I think at the end of the day, we're going to be more effective, more efficient, and definitely government's going to be more accountable.
How worried are you that you
How do you expect to govern this way if it has been taking this long to get the Congress united?
See, this is the great part. Because it took this long, now we learned how to govern. So now we'll be able to get the job done. Thank you all very much. See you later.
Thank you, sir.
Caitlin, I believe that was your question on governance now that you have this coalition, considering how conservative the Republicans who held out and concessions were made for are. Talk to us about the realities ahead for this Congress and Kevin McCarthy's majority.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, Errol, because it is this optimism that you're hearing from him. But at the same time, the reality is that because it took this long, it shows these divisions within the party. And not only the divisions, but how narrow this majority really is, that you really have to Scott's point, hunt for every last vote just to be able to make it to a position of leadership here, just to be able to get the party to pick a leader. So what does this portend about the party's ability to govern given this dynamic? I will say, however, that the atmosphere certainly feels very different than it did earlier today by virtue of lawmakers coming off the floor and sounding optimistic, but also in the last hour when Congressman Scalise, the majority leader of the party, came over and stopped and talked with us and our cameras, kind of showed that they're feeling good about where things are headed. So really it's being able to peel away 2 more votes that McCarthy needs, and they're hoping to do that tonight.
Scott, let me ask you, for those who stood by Kevin McCarthy from the very beginning, who supported him initially, and they're watching these negotiations take place, I wonder how they're feeling about all of the concessions that he had to make in order to gain traction with these opponents.
This is always a balancing act. Managing a conference, or for the Democrats, a caucus, is always a balancing act. If you try to accommodate one side, you are likely to displease the other. But here's the thing, and there's really no way around this. Not only are there a number of newly elected House members in the Republican conference who won Biden districts Joe Biden prevailed in the 2020 election, but some of them are coming in with a mandate to normalize politics. They came in either having defeated election deniers in primaries, or they came in promising to restore normalcy to Washington. So they're now coming up against a faction which has just destabilized a speaker vote for the first time in more than a century, strung out a speaker vote into multiple days and multiple ballots. They're going to have a voice here. And no doubt they've been part of these negotiations, but not a part that prevailed. And they now are bound to whatever agreements Kevin McCarthy has cut. That's why I think the next 2 years are going to be a dynamic 2 years. That's a charitable term to describe what's coming up. When Kevin McCarthy says we just figured out how to govern today, I think he might be putting a rosier hue on this picture than it deserves.
Yeah, and Caitlin, to Scott's point, the flip side of all of this is how Democrats are in lockstep behind Hakeem Jeffries. They also saw the lackluster response in the midterm elections by the Republican base. There was no red wave. So how might they now govern, considering what they've just witnessed this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think Scott can attest to this, that you talk to a Democrat up here on Capitol Hill and they have been feeling great. They believe that, every time their caucus gets to stand up and say Hakeem Jeffries' name in unison and show the same numbers for him, they believe that sends a powerful message and that it is a contrast to the Republican side. They also argue that they did overperform, or that Republicans underperformed in the past election. And remember, on the other side of the Capitol, Democrats gained a seat on the Senate side. It's still a very narrow majority over there as well. So it does raise the question of what Republicans over here are going to actually be able to do, because they campaigned on trying to stop the Biden agenda. And so if they can't really be in unison there, Democrats have been telling us that that is the political dynamic going on. But Democrats are still going to have to show that they can get something done here as well in some capacity. There are still a lot of issues at the forefront for them that they want to address. So this is just all going to be very difficult and messy.
Difficult and messy
Difficult,
is a great
messy,
way to put it.
Interesting.
Prolonged.
Lots
Scott,
of ways to describe
that's
it.
That's right. Well, Scott McFarland, Caitlin Huey-Burns, we appreciate your reporting. Thank you both so much. Today marks 2 years since the storming of the Capitol on January 6th.
And Attorney General Merrick Garland says the Justice Department's investigation into those riots is far from over. The department's probe into the insurrection is the largest ever conducted by the agency. More than 900 arrests have been made and more than 950 people have been charged. And those charges range from unlawful trespassing to crimes as severe as seditious conspiracy.
President Biden awarded 14 Presidential Citizens Medals to people involved in defending the Capitol and preserving democracy. 3 of these medals